Okay. Awesome. And we're live.
We
Welcome.
are live.
We are. Aldo, how you doing?
Hi, Lewis. Great to see you virtually. It's been a long,
Yeah,
it's been
I
long since
know.
last time we're having our last recruitment show in the city of London.
I think,
But
I think the last one, the last one we did live was probably about 6 weeks ago, I think. So,
yeah,
but this is really cool. As everyone knows, I've been doing a lot of video casts, which have been really fun. And we've wanted to do a live show for a long time, something really interactive, answer questions, address questions that get sent in. So yeah, this is really cool. This gives us a good opportunity. So we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can watch us on any of those platforms. We were going to go on Instagram, but they don't let you stream to Instagram, so we'll work out how to do that later. And it's really good. So
yes,
Aldo's in you're in your living room. I'm in my living room.
yeah. It's a wonderful day, sunny day in London, and seems to be like that for the days to come. So great to connect with people. We've been receiving lots of emails, phone calls to see what's going on at the moment. And Lewis, what are your views? And can you give us an overview of the market right now? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's a really crazy time. I mean, obviously, like extraordinary, and things have been moving at such a fast pace. I think overall, this is the worst economy that I've worked in, for sure. If you look at a macro level, a lot of different industries are being affected differently, right? So it's a tough moment, and I think you always have to appreciate that a lot of people are in a tough spot. Some aren't. It's quite interesting, actually. A lot of the industries that have been badly affected, who have been making redundancies, typically been redundancies with lower paid workers. So, it's important just to bear all this in mind. What you also see is it's such a variation between different industries. So, there are pockets of activity, people hiring. Amazon, as if they needed more sales, I think they've hired another 175,000 extra people. And so I found one of the big winners in this so far is big tech firms, right? Amazon, Microsoft, Google. These people have been doing really well, and they've really been able to also transition and their business strategies, or even, I mean, these were trends anyway, but to subscription, business infrastructure, e-commerce, the kind of three big trends that seem to be doing quite well. They've been able to pivot a lot. So I think overall it's tough. There are jobs. Some of our clients are still hiring. Some have paused. Some are taking a bit longer than normal. The great thing is a lot of people have been using the technologies available, right? So Zoom, Google Hangouts, like all of those things which we can speak about. So there's great stories of people hiring and using new technologies, but it's definitely a tough moment. And I think, there are less jobs. Obviously people are at home, working from home, which causes a whole raft of issues around mental health and, keeping people engaged and all of those things. So it's quite interesting. But if you know me, I'm a pretty positive guy. So the the silver lining, I think, with all of this is it's just people really pulling together. I feel, like in London where I live, a lot of the time I couldn't tell you about my neighbours. Like you see some of them, you don't see others, and it really feels like the country and other parts of the world are really pulling together. We have like a local postcode Facebook group. People are like doing food delivery. So I think for me the silver lining is that, and as things start to open up, we're going to see a whole raft of changes of the way we live and work.
Well, hopefully we're going to see a lift of restrictions in the coming month. We're waiting for this announcement by the government on Sunday, and I guess we will have a better view on the market as soon as the restrictions are lifted. But what our clients do you think are doing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's really variable. From like, and if you look at the hotel industry, I mean, nothing going on, no activity. And whereas you look at Ocado in the UK, Amazon, as I mentioned, loads of activity going on. So I think we'll see. I'm hoping things start to get lifted early June,
Yeah.
and schools open up probably in a controlled way, and different industries start to get open up in different rates. And I know the government have been working on the plans and guidance for that. So I think overall different industries will get back into action at different rates. But I mean, this is going to be, it's transformational, right? Like we're not going to be back to how we were before.
Yeah.
Bars are going to be taking ages to open. Coffee shops are going to be doing takeaway. Restaurants are going to be less.
Absolutely.
It's going to be interesting, you
A
know.
friend of mine, a friend of mine told me this morning he went to a corporate meeting, and he sat in a very large room, very far distant from the person he had to have the meeting with, wearing the mask, and they were talking for 3 hours while wearing the masks. So
Oh,
it's
really?
it's
You know,
changed so much.
what's going to be quite interesting is, is meetings with masks on. You
Yes.
know, going and or doing a client pitch wearing a mask or something like that. But also the other thing is we've been told to stay at home and save lives for, you know, the best part of 2 months now.
Yeah.
So again, the psychology of it, people are at home, they're worried about getting the virus if they haven't had it already.
Hmm.
So, you know, it's going to be very interesting for the government to start to get people to feel comfortable getting out, you know, comfortable spending money, comfortable interacting with their colleagues. You know,
Totally.
those things are going to take quite a while.
And what are all the challenges you see around the virtual interviews?
Yeah, so a lot of companies have clearly moved to virtual interviewing, and this was a trend that was happening anyway. So you know, we do, as you know, a lot of international searches, and a lot of our customers were interviewing over video anyway. But I think fundamentally, it's been a big change for most companies and most people,
Hmm.
because you know, like everyone says, oh, you know, I feel like I'm a good judge of character, or you meet someone for the first time and first impressions count for a lot, and you
Hmm.
can read their body language. You know, I speak a lot with my hands, but
Hmm.
here, usually actually my hands are down here, you can't even see I'm speaking with my hands. So you know, it's quite challenging to make a decision to hire based on a video call. I think it's taken people quite a while to adjust and get there, but many are. For the senior hires that we do,
Yeah.
it feels like there'll be some face-to-face element.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, like a lot of companies that are hiring kind of maybe lower level, entry level, different types of jobs, it's being used a lot actually, and I think it's great. Um,
Hmm.
Also, yeah, also the other big change is actually the work from home thing.
Hmm.
You know, like we've been talking about work-life balance for a long time. We've been talking about working from home for a long time,
Yeah.
and now we're submersed in it, right? Like we're all working from home,
It's going to be
and
the new normal. Restriction of working hours at the office, different ways and alternative ways to commute to work, to avoid public transport. I was reading about that, for example, what they're going to do in Paris and in other European cities. So it's very interesting. And
yeah,
yeah,
I think I might start cycling to work. I've
yeah,
got my bicycle. I might start cycling. That's the other thing, is getting people on the tube again in London, or trains in big cities.
yeah.
That's going to be that's going to be a tough one. So it feels like London's going to be less busy for quite a long time, and the impact on office
Definitely.
space,
Oh yes,
the impact
absolutely.
on office space is going to be interesting. You
Well,
know,
you know what? Also, now we're talking about many people being on furlough, and government is saying that obviously this is a non-sustainable model. When they'll remove it, I'm afraid that many people will find themselves out of work. What can people do if they find that, or the people that already found that unfortunately bad news, the company cannot cope with the crisis, they are out of work. What can they do?
yeah. So I think it ends in the end of June, the furlough scheme.
Yeah.
So if the government don't extend it, or certainly don't change it in some way, like I'd like to see them say, hey, you know, we'll cover a proportion of the salary,
Yeah.
plus they can go back to work for a day or two if you top it up, or something of that nature. Because ultimately, you know, the financial you know, the impact of the furlough scheme has been good, right? Like people have been furloughed rather than made redundant, and companies could keep the cash and then, restart the business later on down the line, which is great. But obviously you need people, right, to restart your business. Like some of these furloughed people could be doing like some really productive tasks for their companies. So I'd like to see that happen. Otherwise, I think in June, we'll see, unfortunately, a whole raft of redundancies. And a lot of transformational stuff was coming anyway in different industries. People using new technology, so like digitalization, which we're completely submersed in now. So these kind of cost savings, restructurings were coming anyway, and now it feels like this is really accelerating it. So I think we've been dedicating. I've been dedicating like an hour or two every day just to have a chat with people if they need help, if they've found themselves out of work and stuff. And one interesting thing has been like a lot of industries, they might not ever get back to where they were, or they won't look the same. And so quite a few people, if they've invested a lot of their time in building a career in something, and suddenly they're like, my career might not look the same, then going through their mind is like, what can I do? How can I pivot myself? How can I get a different job? How can I retrain? So there are going to be some tough moments for people, and hopefully, I think we have to look also to government to help retrain people and companies as well. So that will be interesting.
Yeah, and I just had a question that was emailed in. How have you adapted to leading virtually in the current crisis?
It's been really interesting. I mean, I'm a people's person. I love going into work. I love going into city. We sit opposite each other in the office, and we have a lot of dialogue and banter, and I really enjoy that. I get a lot of energy from it. So it took me a while, if I'm honest. Like it took me, maybe say a week or two just to readjust to being at home, because my work is at work and I don't even have an office at home. I've never had an office at home. If I'm doing work, it's often on the phone, writing emails, or on the phone call. So it's taken me a little bit of time. I've tried to stay really structured. So I plan my day like I would do if I was going into work, traditionally. So I do some morning. I usually do a little walk in the morning. I've moved my exercise to lunchtime. So I do online Zoom classes with my CrossFit gym, which is awesome. The big change for me is also because my wife works in the NHS. So I've been taking and picking my kids up from school, which has been interesting. I've always dropped them off. So it's been really nice to spend more time with them. And fortunately for us, the schools have been open, because if they weren't, then I couldn't have worked at all, because my wife's in the NHS working out of the house. So that's been a big challenge for me, and maybe more so for other parents. If both parents are working at home, a lot of companies are expecting maybe like you work 4 hours a day each or something like that. So it's really been interesting to juggle it all. With our team, we're doing like the daily Zoom and stuff like that, the quizzes, and it can sometimes get a bit tiring. They need to be quite focused and stuff. But one really nice thing we've been doing is that we do the coffee, right? So we subscribed to a really nice specialty bag of coffee, and so we all have a bag of coffee, and so we get a nice shared experience, which has been really nice. So we've been doing those things. We've been really trying to engage, keep our energy levels up. Everyone goes through like slightly different ups and downs. So the interesting thing for me is like when you see people face to face, you kind of read how they're feeling. And we're in a relatively small office, so it's quite a nice family environment, right? But when it's behind a screen, it's not always easy to tell how people are feeling, what they're going through. How engaged they are. So that's been quite an interesting thing I've needed to learn, just to make sure that people are feeling all right. And then for me, the biggest thing really, which I think is so important as a leader, or even if you're like in a position where you're trying to pivot and stuff, is just to take a breath, look around, and try and adapt. Because things are always changing. It's not going to be the same as it was.
Well,
And
I think
you might
it's been very challenging for people to build up a routine, structure a routine, and cope with so many challenges you have on a daily basis. Apart from the stress levels going up because of uncertainty, coping with managing your time between work and dealing with family, friends, with the household members. How do you find a way, or how do you structure a routine in order to cope through that on a
yeah,
Monday to Monday basis? Because
yeah. So
a
the hot,
weekend now could be a Tuesday or a Wednesday. You just
yeah.
lose count of which day is which.
I mean, it's bank holiday on Friday. I mean, every day, it's just,
For us, it doesn't matter anymore.
no. The weird thing for me is my kids, like they used to me going to work, and then I'm home, and then like it's all about I'm playing with them or I'm doing activities with them and stuff. And now I'm like closing my living room door, which usually it's like they're allowed in, they watch TV there, they can play around. And now I'm like, no, 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 don't come in, don't come in. Or I'm on a video call, and then one of them came running in wearing like a swimming costume, her goggles, and a swimming hat. And I'm speaking to a really serious guy, and I'm like, you're trying to style it out, and the kids don't know any different, right? They're just being,
Yeah.
they're just being
But you
kids.
feel
So
you're more productive in the morning, or you're more productive in the afternoon. How do you structure that?
I always feel do you know what? Also, it's not necessarily about that for me, because because I've got a family, I'm really organizing my work around my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I drop my kids off at school at 8:30,
Yeah.
right? So and they get up, and I got to get them dressed and stuff. It's not as if I can kick off work at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
So the earliest I can start, really, I get back to the house at 8:45.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm on it, and then I've got to go pick up my kids again at 3:30. So
Mm-hmm.
then my wife comes home, then I can do a little bit in the afternoon. So I don't feel, and I'm going to speak to our colleague Kelly in New York about this on Friday.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, I think, feel guilty. Like I feel guilty that I'm not doing more work, or I feel guilty that I'm starting a bit later or finishing earlier than I would do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are going through that, and it takes a bit of time to adjust to
And
that.
what would your advice be with the people? Because a lot of people, and I got some messages then coming in of people not coping, isolating on their own, so they have no interaction whatsoever, and they still struggle to find a structure because they have no one to talk to.
Yeah. Do you know, yeah, it's a really tough one. I think for me, the things I've really tried to do are, I've tried to keep it really simple. And this can be applied, I think, if you're on your own or have other people around. But I really try and keep, like, there's so much information right now, and you don't want to have information overload. And a lot of the time, the news is negative. If you go down a rabbit hole of reading the papers and all these things, you can get quite depressed quite quickly.
Oh,
So,
yes.
for me, it's like I keep it to a bare minimum. It's like a quick morning check-in. But I've even gone further than that. I often wait till lunchtime. Like I would keep that really light, like the news stuff. Because there's nothing worse than like a big dose of negativity for breakfast. You just, it's not a great way to start the day. The other thing as well is ignore those circular WhatsApp messages for as long as possible. It's like my
There's not enough to mute them.
mother's sisters, boyfriends, ex-husband. Everyone's an expert, right? And everyone sends it around. So mute your groups, ignore it as long as possible, and look at it like, I don't know, a lunchtime or after work or something like that. I mean, that's what I do, and I think it's great. The other thing I do, so that's number one. Number two is think big. So I think it's really important to understand how each of these stories fit into the bigger picture, because like for me, perspective is everything, and so it depends what your perspective is. But if you just step up and you just think of it from a macro level, I think that's really important. Number three for me is do your homework. There's so much analysis out there, You know, scientists have different views, economists have different views. So, you know, there's an awful lot of different views. And obviously, you know, whatever you read forms your opinion.
Mhm.
So I think, and for me, taking a wide variety of information, you know, think about it critically. Don't take people's word as gospel because they're a scientist or because they're an economist. You know, get a wide perspective. I think I read a lot of the McKinsey do some wonderful thinking and analysis on stuff. Economists do some things. Goldman's just released a really simple laid out strategy of how to accurately value stocks and shares, and there's some really cool stuff. So I would do that. And then my next one is do more homework. You know, just never take an analyst's word for it. I would always try and find a little bit more and a little bit more, and I think that will just help with your thinking and stuff. And then for me, the final piece, which I think is super important, is surround yourself with positive people. You know,
Mhm.
in times like this, you got to have good influences in your life, and you can always, you know, the scenario is a scenario. We can't do anything about the virus, but we can choose how to think of it, how
Yeah.
we think about it. And I think it's important to have good influences around you.
Mhm.
You know, choose to speak to them more than others, and it helps with your mental state.
Mhm.
And if you're, you know, if you are on your own at home, you know, I think that would really help.
And also on the, I think it's helping a lot focusing on the creative side of things. People is learning, people is taking the time to learn new stuff, dedicating a couple of hours a day on learning a new language. And I know we've been talking about this before, but committing the time, you definitely see the results. We've been already down 6 weeks on the line, and it's incredible what you can come up with when you're dedicating on purely on dedicating some time to you know, to learn something new and to the creative space.
Yeah, I think just one thing I would caution is remember everyone's in a different scenario. So, you know, if you are a parent with 3 kids, you don't have time to learn another language. I mean, a lot of them are just like trying to get by, you know, just trying to
Mhm.
survive, trying to do work. Um, you know, if you're on your own and you've got time, then absolutely use it to, you know, to learn something new, learn a new language, learn jujitsu, whatever whatever you want to learn. But I think it's, you know, it's just important to do what you're able to do. You know, what you feel comfortable doing, whether it's learning something new, just organizing your family, just being able to make breakfast, do another load of washing. You know, our colleague Kelly in New York, you know, she's got all 4 kids at home, again from
Mhm.
university. Her
Yeah,
husband,
yeah,
4 kids, full house, right?
yeah.
And you know, those kinds of scenarios where you're just really just trying to get by and stuff. So it's not always the case that just because we're locked down, you have like the free time to learn.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's a kind of an exit strategy for you to stay in a good space with the mental health. Because if you think about a family, they rely on you, and you already have the stresses with work, but you have to make sure that you are coping with it. Maybe taking some time for meditation, or you know, it could be half an hour. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long, you know, session. But I think that that could add definitely a good perspective into this.
Definitely. No, I think I know a lot of people are using mindfulness or
Yeah.
meditation. You
Mhm.
know, I know there's some really good apps, and even if it's 5 minutes, just to like take a breath, you know, clear your head,
Mhm.
and just, you know, just to think clearly. I think it's really useful. For me, I'm doing. I've stepped up my exercise, so I'm, as you
Mhm.
know, I do CrossFit, and they've moved to online Zoom classes.
Mhm.
So it's been really weird because I never usually exercise during the day. You know
Mhm.
me, I either organize in the I either exercise in the morning or in the evening. So
Mhm.
it's been really funny, like exercising for lunch or something like that.
Yeah.
It's been good,
Yeah,
but that's
absolutely. Whatever
really,
works. Yes. Great.
yeah. Yeah,
I got a message here. Is this a good time to apply for jobs?
is it a good time to apply? Well, it probably depends on whether you've got one now or not. So
Okay.
I
And
think
because
it,
there are lots of openings at the moment.
I think it depends on the industry, right?
Okay.
So overall, you know, it's a tough moment. like the economy is really bad, everything's been shut down. If you're in the industries which have been hardest hit, I mean, there are no jobs to go to. No one's hiring. It's tough. Other industries are, like financial services. There's activity going on. Healthcare. We know private equity firms are looking to, to start to inject capital and stuff. And Amazon have been hiring 175,000 people. Cardo have been hiring. So, but it really depends on what your specialism is. Like what industry you're in. So I wouldn't say there's a rule. It's very variable right now. For what we do, we do exec search. We hire senior leaders, and even during a good time, it takes a bit of time to find your next senior role.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, there's hiring, and keep your eye open. But I think let's see what the next the rest of the year has in store. But if
And
you're out of
also,
work right now, I was
yeah,
say if you're out of work right now,
I agree with you. And I also noticed, and it will happen to many people, professionals will be forced to reinvent their careers, to start doing new things. Because, as you said, if the current industry has been deeply hit with the crisis, they'll have to, once the doors open back again, they have to reinvent, find new ways, alternative ways to find a profession, a new type of profession, or somehow related to it, where they can apply their core skills into sort of a new sector, a new segment.
But yeah, there's a lot of people. So there's a few things there. So leaders also are really having to adapt now. So we've talked about us people, individuals, whatever, trying to just survive and adapting to working from home. But also, leaders are doing the same thing, right? If they're leading a big company, a small team, whatever the scenario,
yeah,
it's real adjustment and real learning. The way people lead now and the way they'll need to lead going forward is changing. We've had a lot of people come and ask us about, how can they lead in these times? Is there anyone they can speak to? Just someone advice, because it can be quite lonely as a leader. You're the person that everyone's looking to. You're supposed to be leading these Zoom calls, right? So you're on a Zoom call with like 20 people. Half of them have not got their cameras on, because you don't have to have your camera on, and you're trying to get people motivated, engaged. You're like, hey, how are you feeling? And you can't see their video. So learning to do these things is tough. And it's interesting. As you know, we've just started now executive coaching, just out of the demand for a lot of people wanting to continually learn and develop. And it's nice to speak to people, because when you're in a leadership role, it can be quite lonely. There's not many people to turn to, so there's a lot of things that you can do. Yeah,
great.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
yeah,
awesome.
I'm sure that this is going to be a really good moment for all of us. And it's a learning process. We're going to find out more over the weeks to come.
Definitely. I think the last thing to mention is, if you are out of work right now, there are things to do. So we talked about pivoting. So just take a moment and just think about, is your industry going to survive? What's it going to look like? Is your job going to still be around? And if so, really, I would, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to scratch, updated, but contact people. What I found is everyone wants to speak right now. If you need help, ask for it. Everyone's happy to have a chat, video call. Everyone's at home in their living room. So still network virtually, because you never quite know. So there's still positive activities you can do to help yourself try and find your next thing. If you feel that your job might not exist or look like how it did before, then again, I really make sure you speak to people. Someone unconnected, third party really helps, just to get your thinking clear. So I would recommend those things. So look, great first sesh. I think with the recruitment show,
very fun.
It's great. We're going to have guests every week, and so clearly, all the topics we're going to be covering are around leadership, executive search, recruitment. All of those topics. We're going to have industry experts from different parts of the world joining me and Aldo. So it's going to be really fun. Thank you very much for joining us on the first one, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. And please feel free to send out more questions, messaging, emails. You got all our contact details, and looking forward to next week.
Yeah. And I think it should be on the bottom of the page there. You can email your questions, like some people did, to info@bentleyLewis.com. Hope you enjoyed it. See you later.
See you all. Have a great day.